All right, hello everybody. Today we're here with a panel of cyber experts, and we're talking about how the COVID-19 has affected our businesses. There's some tough challenges, but there's also some real opportunities. On one hand, you can run and grow your business while working from home and navigating those challenges. And on the other hand, cybersecurity is more important than ever. So we're going to go from, how you are doing working from home and how your companies are doing working from home to how you can help others with cybersecurity, not just from working from home team members, but also from those businesses and those that might be more or less at risk now. So I'm excited to talk with these experts. I have here today Ron Gula, who's the founder of Gula Tech Ventures. I have Kathleen Booth, the Vice President of Marketing at Attila Security, and Brian Dykstra, the CEO of Atlantic Data Forensics. And I'm here to get their take on how cyber startups can take this opportunity as a mandate to build their businesses into something leaner and more resilient. So let me give it over to each of you for just a quick sec. If you'd like to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your companies. Ron, can you tell us about Gula Tech?
Absolutely. Hey, thanks. I hope everybody's happy and safe and healthy out there. My wife and I started Gula Tech Adventures after leaving Tenable Network Security. We wanted to support sort of the startup cyber ecosystem here in the US. And we've been supporting a wide variety of cyber startups, everything from like 2 persons in a garage, all the way up to like Series B, investments in companies. So we have a really wide view of the market. We've also been giving back a little bit to various economic development groups and some nonprofits like Defending Digital Campaigns. So I'm happy to talk about all that kind of stuff today.
Thank you very much, Ron. Next, Brian, tell me a little bit about Atlantic Data Forensics.
Sure. So we're based here in Maryland. We're a computer forensics company that provides support to law firms and their clients for civil and criminal defense litigation. We also do a really steady business in incident response, data breaches, and that sort of thing. And like Ron said, we try and give back to the community a little bit. Ron actually got me involved with the Defending Digital Campaigns folks too, so we're providing our support to some of those folks in their current quest to move their campaigns forward.
Thank you, Brian. And Kathleen, tell me about Attila.
So Attila protects data in motion. The company started with our hardware, which is the world's smallest portable VPN firewall and Wi-Fi hotspot. And since our beginnings in 2018, we've built a software platform around that helps organizations protect their data whenever they're connecting with people, devices, partners, or any other device or endpoint at the edge.
Wonderful. So all 3 of you have some different needs as far as marketing is concerned. And one thing that we really had to shift at Mindgrub was how we market during these times, because we do high touch B2B sales. And so without the ability to get together and meet in groups and to really kind of solve problems and impress upon people our subject matter expertise, we've had to move online. How are each of you doing some kind of marketing now that you weren't doing 2 months before because we don't have physical meetings right now? Kathleen, I know you're a marketer. What have you been doing for Attila? I'm sure you kind of jumped right in there.
It's been interesting. I joined Attila in mid-January, and I spent my first 30 days developing a 90-day marketing plan and strategy that I promptly had to throw out the window because then the pandemic hit. But we actually pivoted pretty quickly, and our prior strategy had relied heavily on in-person events. So we put on March 31st, a day-long virtual summit on secure remote work solutions. And, we're small. We don't have a huge list yet as a growing company. So for us, what's really been a home run has been being very collaborative. So we partnered with 5 or 6 other cybersecurity companies, as well as a media partner, the Cyberwire, to put that together really quickly. And, my belief is a rising tide lifts all boats. And so, it was a good event for all of us to do some lead generation in a really quick and scrappy way. And I think we'll probably be doing more things like that.
So the Cyberwire, was that an online event?
So our event was a day-long virtual summit held on Zoom, very much like sort of like this kind of a conversation. The CyberWire was really our media partner. They sponsored it and helped us promote the event, but we hosted the whole thing and worked closely with several other cybersecurity companies, as well as some non-cyber companies that have unique secure remote work solutions.
Got it. Now, Brian, I know you did a lot of physical speaking. Are you now doing a lot of digital speaking events? Has that kind of been your go-to as well?
Yeah, that's definitely been what we're doing. In fact, this is my second one today. So yeah, probably doing in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 of those a week at this point, just generating a lot of content there. Also been working with the folks at Cybrary, bringing in a series of podcasts that was kind of a spin off our previous podcast series, but talking about, talking to people in a lot of different industries, on the IT side, the cybersecurity side, and some of them just in the management side, about, how they're dealing with things right now. And we're doing it in sort of a group sessions. There's people from a couple different industries in there discussing, how it's affecting them and their businesses. And it's interesting what comes out of that. There's some similarities, but some businesses are definitely struggling a lot harder than others in their industry right now. So that, and then we have a 14 year history to lean on. So I'm actually doing a lot of personal outreach to clients. I jumped into my CRM, which I unfortunately don't get to as often as I'd like to, and I started placing calls. Just simply calling, every one of my clients, people who've been past clients and all that, and just checking up. How you doing? What's going on? And amazingly, there's been opportunities that have fallen out of that. So,
yeah, we've done the same thing. We've created a series of micro campaigns, anything that does kind of a view into our CRM to say, here's a need that this 15 clients might have, and we'll do a little micro cam and come up with something. Ron, as an investor, typically investors hadn't been out there kind of doing marketing. They got a lot of kind of inbound deal flow. Have you noticed the kind of the ecosystem and people asking for funding? Has that changed significantly since the pandemic?
So, good news. I haven't heard of any startups that had to fold or shut down. People who were kind of scrappy before might not be able to go out and raise $500,000 or a couple $1 million now, which is unfortunate. But there's a lot of great companies out there who are still fundraising. I'm involved in probably 2 or 3 deals, right now. And we've seen a lot of big deals, announced. Cerebro Finance Capital just got a fundraise as well right here in Baltimore. So, it's still going on. But what's happening is like a lot of people who don't deal with venture capital, they don't realize like all the different work a VC does behind the scenes. So the VCs are busier now supporting their current portfolio company, busier now than ever, trying to make those same recommendations and trying to make sure they're tight with their customers, trying to make sure that, if there's a need from a customer that they haven't got to one of their portfolio companies yet, they're trying to make sure those introductions are being done and those use cases are there. The biggest thing we've had to change at Gula Tech is we were going to do like a Shark Tank event this month. Was going to be next week, and we postponed that because we really wanted to do a physical in-person kind of event, not only just to make a good investment, but to kind of feature that Mid-Atlantic area. And we're postponing that indefinitely right now.
Have you thought about doing that instead digitally and do it online?
So we did, and that's what I do every day. So when we make investments, we put up press releases and stuff. It won't have the same effect as that. I'm really happy with all the virtual things people are doing, and it would obviously make a lot of difference to a winner. But we're still making investments, so it's not like we're not investing in winners. But I really wanted to feature the Mid-Atlantic region, specifically maybe some of the assets we have in this area, and it's kind of hard to do that with maybe a virtual background of Baltimore or Columbia or DC or something like that. So I'm going to opt for physical in person as soon as we can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we have in Mindgrub a small ventures arm too, because we take on a lot of startups. We'll take an equity position as we build their software or market their software. But we've been having a lot of conversations around those industries that are going to really benefit from the disruption, and those industries that are hard hit. We know the ones in hospitality, sports and entertainment, really hard hit, which is unfortunate. And there is hopefully some programs that'll get them to sustain. Ron, where are you seeing some industries right now, maybe in telecommunications and in health and home service, maybe even within cyber, that you think are going to benefit from the disruption that's happening right now?
Well, the more we work remotely, the more remote access is a big deal. So solutions like Attila, solutions that can bring, the entire NIST cybersecurity framework, down to the endpoint while you're working at home are a big deal. So anything that does zero trust, anything that really lets you do that maybe on my own hardware and not corporate hardware is a good thing. The problem is you deal with all sorts of privacy issues and all sorts of who's in charge of that asset, who's got the right to to do those kind of things. And at the same time, when you go home, it was great that we can talk about cyber, but if you think about you're in the military or at a big bank, what processes do you have in place that, become sort of moot when you have physical risks? If you're at an apartment like this, I was doing this with the Defending Digital Campaigns folks, a lot of these staffers who are working on these campaigns have got like 4 roommates or 3 roommates, right? Well, does that change your physical risk? Do you really want to put that kind of asset out there? So I think the cyber industry is going to be, up to the challenge to come up with new types of solutions, for this remote workforce, and because we're going to be with it for a long time.
Right. What are you seeing that's different? Even Brian or Kathleen, that for people that are working from home, traditionally we might VPN into a network. Obviously, I was saying, in some of the world, if they could have small sheds that were little skiffs that they could drop off, and you just walk outside, you go in your shed and it's a skiff and it happens to have secure, 5G line or something to it. But prior to that, have you noticed, additional security measures beyond just VPNing in that are starting to emerge right now for home workers?
So some of our larger clients, because they weren't prepared for their entire workforce to go remote all of a sudden. So their VPN infrastructure wasn't up to it. So that they're scrambling behind that, trying to add capacity, things like this. And quite honestly, a number of them, didn't have laptops for everybody that they could easily send home with them. I spoke to one client last week. They boxed up desktop computers. I don't know what the plan was there exactly, and sent them home with people and said, well, just, hook them up when you get there. And I was like, yeah, don't see how that goes.
Right, right.
But also I spoke to others where they'd talk to their employee base that was, going to be forced to go onto home computers and stuff like that, about actually pushing out, they pushed out AV clients to them. They pushed out, MDR solutions to them, managed detection and response stuff, and actually, got that onto users' home systems and things like this, to help kind of bring up the security standards in those environments where there was just not much else they could do about it. Spoke to a large law firm 2 weeks ago that they'd actually had to bring all what they considered non-essential, so basically non-lawyer personnel, off their remote network because they just simply didn't have the global capacity for it. So there's a lot of kind of struggling, shifting. There is opportunities there if you are a cybersecurity product company right now, and you have remote access and remote security sort of tools, because there's definitely a buyer's market. On the other end, I think a lot of the internal infrastructure cyber stuff is, I spoke to a SEM manufacturer earlier today, and they said their pipeline had dropped to 0. Wow. Just because that's just not a focus for these companies right now.
Right. Yeah, we were kind of none the wiser because we already were on entirely laptops. We travel for our clients all the time, so we have to be able to get online from hotel rooms, and when we're the engineers, we're already VPN in. So we didn't really have to change anything. Kathleen, did you have to change much, or are you advising your clients on making any changes now with remote work?
Well, I mean, we're really lucky because our original product was built for exactly this use case. Our CTO, Vesh, bought was working at the NSA, and he was involved in an internal innovation contest to solve just this problem. It was, how do you provide traveling executives with extremely secure access back into a network that handles very sensitive information, and do it in a way that's really easy for them to configure and use without support, when they're away. And so so we're fortunate we get to use our own product for our own use case. But what's really interesting that I've seen is that this whole situation has presented a range of challenges that I just don't think we've thought about. Things like needing to be able to support whatever solution we put in place without any human contact. So we have a lot of organizations that felt very prepared because they had enterprise grade software VPNs, but maybe they weren't prepared for a situation where the entire workforce had to go remote right away, and bring your own device, people's home computers with legacy operating systems, putting a modern software VPN on some of those devices on their smartphones, et cetera, is a little bit more complicated when you have to do it quickly and you can't send your IT team to install it, not to mention the issue that comes down the road with patching and keeping those things up to date, because the VPN is only as good as the patches you continue to apply to it. So I think that's an interesting new challenge that the industry is grappling with now. And what we're seeing is just a lot of chaos. I think Brian's exactly right. There's so many organizations weren't prepared for this, both from a hardware standpoint, as well as from an ongoing maintenance standpoint. And so, again, we're fortunate that we have a product that was designed to solve that. And I'm a marketer, I'm not a cybersecurity person, but I was able to take our Go Silent, which is the product, and come home when I started working at Attila and set it up myself in under 5 minutes. It's things like that we need at a time like this, because you just, every user at this point is their own CIO, and you need to give them technology that they can configure. And if they don't like it, they're going to choose something else. And that's what's really scary, is usability is such a huge factor. And people are going to default to the things that are comfortable, familiar, and easy. So we have to make it as comfortable, familiar, and easy as possible for them.
Well, that's good. It sounds like there has been a real hardware issue and then really a volume issue. Is there any additional issues with, for certain companies, with just having more users trying to access their systems? Meaning, what additional vulnerabilities have been created that might not have existed before? Ron, Brian, are there some new vulnerabilities with this remote workforce that we didn't have previously?
So a lot of the, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say this, so that kind of one of the things that went along with the remote access is we had unfortunately we've taken on some new clients because of this, but there was also lack of ability to remotely share documents and things like this. So what they could do through the VPNs and things like this were somewhat limiting through some of these Citrix environments, things like this. So we saw a situation where companies made really sort of bad but expedient choices for document sharing. Wholesale lifting of file servers and dumping them into Dropbox and things like this, just so that people could continue to try and, service their clients and their, things like this. And so it resulted in this sort of mass file sharing. Also that file sharing going out to then home computers. And then you have this sort of follow-on situation that I hadn't really thought about, although my wife's in HR for a very large company that laid off, hundreds of employees. So, you had this massive amount of file sharing and things like this going on. And then, of course, a few weeks later, you lay off 40, 50% of your workforce. How do you get your documents back? Things like this. There's just this whole series of unintended things that happened and data that kind of spread wide and far during those first few weeks.
Yeah, a couple of vulnerabilities I've been seeing include the use of just the home computer, like literally not a corporate asset, it's just the home computer. And, there's so many HR issues with that. There's so many security issues with that. You can take on patching for it, for example. You can bring in part of your domain. It's just crazy in some cases. The other thing we've been seeing is that people are rapidly rolling out new cyber stuff. And although as a cyber investor, former vendor, whatever, you want to see that procurement stuff, but, organizations who are realizing that their current VPN, for example, is not up to snuff, and they're rolling out something. If they're not choosing something easy like Attila, they're going to mess it up. And the use case I'm seeing right now is Casby's. There's a lot of people who are realizing that you can't VPN in, carry that traffic, and then let your users, surf the internet. You've got to let them go directly to the internet with some filtering. So something like a Netscaler or a Netscope Zscaler is good, but you can screw those things up. And then, lastly, I think a lot of people are trying to dramatically enhance their phishing, because there's been an increase in phishing attacks. I mean, the adversaries is not sitting around. So when you are changing phishing things, a lot of those organizations who have traditional phishing, they're kind of in line. And the next generation of stuff works directly with O365, directly with G Suite. But now might not be the time you want to mess with your corporate email systems. I'm seeing a lot of organizations introduce vulnerabilities by making these needed changes a bit too rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I imagine speed and making them too quickly is one issue. What about the difference between companies that I would say had already been digitally transformed versus those that weren't? Like at Mindgrub, we don't have a server farm. Everything was always in the cloud. We've always used laptops. So there was no change other than we said, you can't come to the office anymore. There was some boos, but nothing changed. What about companies that were the opposite? Everything was in their own data center, their own networks. They were using desktops. Have you noticed a real kind of digital divide, even amongst digital companies now?
Yeah, without naming names, there's a lot of government agencies, a lot of larger financial agencies, which, they have great disaster preparedness. I mean, they're very, very resilient, but, they were not resilient for 100% of the workforce to work remotely in this case. So, are they still working? Yes, they're still working. Are people at home not doing anything productive? Yes, that's what's happening. So that's what I've been saying.
Yeah, how does that work? If you're ready and willing to work, but otherwise your employer doesn't have their act together, do you get to sit around? I mean, our kids got to sit around and have, spring break early because our school system had to ramp up and get prepared to, work online. Have companies had to really kind of retool themselves over a period of time, or did everybody just go to work? It seemed like everybody was in scramble mode. They just did whatever they could to figure it out, almost as a sense of normalcy. But I haven't heard of too many people that are now not, fully engaged working remotely, for those that could, obviously, for those businesses that could do it versus, retail or restaurants with a storefront that couldn't. Have you noticed any other surprises with companies going online?
Some of them don't want to go back.
Yeah,
working is working
we're in
well
that boat.
Yeah. And they say it's working well for us, so maybe we won't go back. Maybe we're going to rethink our, our footprint. As we're all doing, we're doing multiple one of these. I did a webinar the other day with a building manager, somebody who offers space, worldwide. And they were saying that, for the last 10, 15 years, it was all about trying to cram as many people per square feet comfortably into some place that's cool. That's dramatically changed. That's completely dramatically changed. So maybe it's going to be more stuff like hoteling and WeWorks and that kind of thing in the future.
Yeah, my brain's been spinning on that. But even before this happened, we were outgrowing our office space, which is lease space. And, it's, 4 to 5 million over the course of the 10-year lease on it. And I thought, well, if we need just a little more space, why don't I do a lot? Like if you're familiar with the Agora companies, they've got a dozen buildings plus in downtown Baltimore, really amazing historic buildings that they've just grown over the years. I thought, why don't I get just one extra building? And we got the Mind Pub, which is a restaurant that we've converted into R&D space, both tech and incubator. But now my thought is that if some people want to work entirely remote, some people really like the office, why do we have to have what I'm now calling the big box office, the one big office in Baltimore that our expectation is everybody has to work out of? So instead, mix it up. And we have those that are fully virtual. Where we have cities where we have a lot of employees and a saturation of employees or clients, it makes a lot of sense to have a Mind Pub there. We can otherwise monetize a space as a cafe and a co-working space, but then have a floor or two as dedicated Mindgrub space, but not have that big box. I think we will need it for corporate headquarters. But anyway, companies like Mindgrub that are now spreading out, how does that pose different problems as well in the security space? Because whereas our MindPub is the same network as Mindgrub, believe it or not, I don't know, magic, they somehow did that, but you can take your laptop and plug in or Wi-Fi, and it's the exact same network as our office down the street. Is that the same? Can you do that if I put an office in New Orleans? Is that possible?
Oh, sure. I mean, you could rig something up like that. I mean, but what you're saying is true. I mean, we've heard from two different banking financial services companies that we take care of that both of them are considering a substantial reduction in both personnel and the number of physical locations they're running, because they're finding during this period that they're doing fine with the remote help centers, their web presence, and and ATMs essentially out there, that they probably don't need a number of those the locations that they were running. Also talked to we were on a thing earlier this week with head of commercial real estate for a large commercial real estate holder, and similarly they were saying that they didn't think their industry was going to recover anytime soon from this, because they're just taking a steady influx of calls from businesses essentially wanting to break their leases because their business is down entirely, and for those that weren't wanting to restructure their leases, they just plain wanted out, and so they figured they were going to be sitting on a lot of empty space that they weren't necessarily going to be able to push soon. And a couple of my larger clients that had gone fully remote, have been operating really well for a few weeks now, are talking about maybe this is how we should be operating. Maybe this is a better, more efficient way to operate. One of them was actually saying they were getting, and I've actually noticed this internally to us, they were getting more billable work hours out of their employees who were at home
our
were
billable went up. Yeah.
necessarily dragging people in and out of the office all the time, and the distractions of that and commutes and everything else. So they were looking at the bottom line going, maybe it doesn't really make sense to have these big offices that we're pulling people into.
You know what though? There were some companies that I was jealous because they didn't have an office that started the same time as Mindgrub. And they actually grew a little faster. They got to 15, 20 people faster than we did. But ultimately, they've all gone down, and they're down in the single digits, and a lot of them are collapsing now. I think without that office, they weren't able to create a really strong sense of culture. That said, there is, WordPress is entirely virtual. Fire Engine Red is entirely virtual. So there are companies that
Labs
do it.
is all remote. They're all remote too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I worked, when I had my business, we were largely virtual. And then the company that I sold to, where I spent 2 years following my exit, I remotely managed a team of 9, and we were 70% remote. So I've seen it work really well. And the great thing about remote and being open to it is it lets you hire the best people no matter where they are. And talent, wins every time. And so I do think that that's going to give all of us an advantage if we're able to internalize that lesson as a result of this. Having said that, in terms of what does that mean for security and how we approach it in the future, one of the interesting things that I've seen is a quickening pace of conversation around adoption of virtual desktop. That's one way to solve for a lot of what we're talking about. It eliminates this issue of what is the operating system on your home computer. It eliminates a lot of the file sharing and collaboration problems that we have. I think, there was some momentum in that direction before all of this, but I think that's going to really speed up considerably. And what that will mean then is that, in addition to having a virtual desktop environment, it'll mean being able to, I think it was Ron that mentioned zero trust earlier. It will mean really having a good solution in place to verify that, the end user that's logging into that virtual desktop environment is who they say they are. And so there's going to be an opportunity there for some companies as well.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I think, processors are getting a lot faster, that a lot of office work you'll be able to do on a, virtualized desktop just fine. Rendering video and, things that are a lot more intensive, obviously you have to do home. Yeah, I'm really curious as kind of, some parting words. really curious about any companies or technologies that you guys want to finish up with. I did a little, my marketing department called them Todd Talks, just little kind of quick, 1 to 2 minute things online, trying to be a little bit more of an influencer. Obviously, we all have to do that to, get some, airtime and eyeballs now. But these are a list of companies that came up in 2008 and 2009 during the last major recession, which if you look at the Dow between them, this has been a much bigger disruption in the market. But Airbnb, Uber, WhatsApp, Groupon, Asana, GitHub, Slack, Stripe, Pinterest, Square, Venmo, and just in 2010 was Instagram. So what technologies or companies do you see right now that you think can be the next Instagram? Anybody have any winners? I did.
Sure.
I threw down a lot of money in Zoom in November. I'm very proud of myself for that, and it's only because I've got this habit of, if all of a sudden everyone around me is doing something in technology and I finally do it, then it's really going to take off, because I'm sometimes an adoption Luddite. So I bought a bunch of Zoom, and I'm very happy that that's been up, 120, 130%.
Zoom took
and
on what,
obviously
8 million new
telecommunications
clients
is
in a month?
big. What's that, Brian?
I said Zoom, I believe they stated that they took on, like, in the month of March, 8 million new users or something like that. I mean, it was just unprecedented growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the disruption that's happening around the event space right now. There's a lot of events technology companies and meeting companies. That's really interesting to me. Health, obviously, when you used to have to go through trials for your education, even, it seemed, to be able to onboard nurses and doctors, now they're taking, excuse me, they're taking first-year students practically and getting them into the fight, and they're having to train them up on, donning and doffing their gear and all of that. So the healthcare space is being absolutely, disrupted right now. Ron, do you see yourself crossing over? I mean, with Hopkins and Maryland in this area, and Mercy and all the other hospitals, do you ever see kind of maybe staying in cyber, but start looking at how that's going to cross into the healthcare space more?
A lot of cyber companies will work in healthcare verticals, and we're happy to do that. And they've got their own idiosyncrasies, like their IoT is completely different than Power's, IoT, but they have the same kind of regulations and whatnot. I don't have a whole lot of examples of like the next Instagram or the next Zoom. I do believe, though, that this is really going to force what the DoD was working on with their CMMC certification, which basically says if you're a supplier to the DoD, you got to have basic cyber hygiene. You have to be able to demonstrate that. Anybody who can help with that, and whether it's just demonstrating you have incident response from Atlanta Data Forensics, or you have remote access with Attila, but anybody who can basically bring that to a large number of people who are going to be working remotely is going to be able to, I think make some good money out there.
I can give you one that's from outside of cyber, Todd.
Sure.
And I don't know if it'll be the next Instagram, but I definitely think there's some market growth. With this move to remote work, we talked about how a lot of companies won't go back, or they'll have a much larger remote workforce in the future. And putting back on my hat as a marketer and coming out of the marketing world, I think that there are some really great tools, like, for example, Vidyard, that makes asynchronous and one-to-one, like, personalized video much easier to accomplish. So, if I'm in a sales role, or if I'm trying to communicate with other members of my team, being able to send them a message on video as opposed to typing it in Slack or sending an email, there's so much context that comes out of seeing someone's face and hearing their voice that you can't capture in the written word. And Vidyard actually a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago released a new product, which is a secure internal video communication tool. So it's not like a Zoom, it's not a live tool, but I'm going to send you a video message. So I think companies like that are able to help with some of the cultural challenges you mentioned that can crop up when you have remote teams, and improve communication and collaboration, they should see a lot of growth.
Yeah, we're actually considering making software that can make a better kind of virtual space. So a lot of our creative teams right now, they're using new tools for being able to do collaboration. So card sorting or KJ sessions where they're taking sticky notes and sorting them. There's new software to do that. But we think the environment where you can have almost like an office environment that can show where people are if they're in meetings, it's giving a visual representation of where they are in their workday. If they're at their desk, it's showing them at their desk. But what we're missing in all this remote work is that kind of that visualization of where people are, not just at home, but where they are in that workflow. And so we were thinking if you could have conference rooms that were then virtualized space to do some collaboration like whiteboarding, but instead you're using Magic Hands or you're using a Wacom tablet to be able to write, right? And to be able to have meetings where you can go up to somebody's desk and then virtually go into a meeting space and it just instantly pops the Zoom meeting for you and makes it more seamless. So we do see that there'll probably be the collision more of those 3D worlds. You know, we have a Minecraft environment going on right now, but completely detached from our work environment. But it will probably be less detached. One thing that we see is that this is probably the greatest evolution in the convergence of man and biology that's ever happened. And we might not realize it so much, but 50 years ago when, you know, people are getting microchips, you know, infused in their DNA, you know, in vitro, at that point, we'll look back and say this all started in 2020 when we were all home online 24/7. But yeah, it's been great having everybody on the show. Any parting words to anybody out there in terms of the one thing you should be considering right now?
You should sanitize your keyboard.
Yes, thank you. And your doorknobs.
UVC disinfectant lights.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, good thinking.
I guess since I deal in the rather less than sunny side of the business, my wife brought up something to me the other day. I said she runs HR for a large organization, and she said they were struggling with. Everybody's got some bad employees. She's like, you send a bad employee home on work from home, and it becomes this whole other special sort of trouble to deal with. And so she was struggling greatly to deal with how did we manage those less than perfect employees out there and trying to come up with subtle ways to sort of keep them moving.
Right. I heard that too. Yeah. Fortunately at Mindgrub, we started annually doing, you know, kind of talent reviews about 4 or 5 years ago and really figuring out, you know, who could check the independent worker box and who couldn't, even amongst interns. You know, we want to make sure that they can work, you know, works independently, gets a real strong check. But I have heard that remote workers and those that do not work as independently have been a bit of a challenge. Yeah. So then what's your advice? Hire slow and hire right in the first place?
I don't know. I like treating my workforce like my family, and you know, you got some good ones, you got some bad ones. I love them all.
That's good advice. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ron and Kathleen and Brian, for coming on today. I'm glad you could join us and share everything that's happening in cyber and marketing and product development right now.
Thanks,
Thanks
Todd.
for having us.